Let's bring in Bruce Klingner to talk more about all of this. He is a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation and a former CIA Deputy Division Chief for Korea. Good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
So a new UN report says North Korea continues to build up its nuclear ballistic missile program despite UN sanctions. And now we learn President Trump has absolutely no interest in meeting with Kim Jong-un before the November elections. So what's Kim's likely next move here?
He very well may carry out what had been an end-of-year deadline where North Korea hinted they would do some kind of provocation, either revealing a new strategic weapon or perhaps doing some kind of missile launch. They could go incrementally up the escalation ladder, doing medium range, intermediate range, or go immediately to crossing President Trump's red line of an ICBM or a nuclear test.
Right. Of course, this comes as the UN report says that North Korea is also secretly using barges to export coal, petroleum and sand in return for hundreds of millions of dollars. So what should the US and the rest of the world be doing about that?
Well, the world really has been not fully enforcing the required UN resolution sanctions, and the U.S. has also been pulling its punches. When last March, when the U.S. sanctioned two of many Chinese shipping companies that were violating the resolutions, President Trump reversed that action by the Treasury Department, and a year and a half ago he said that there were 300 North Korean entities that he was not sanctioning because we're talking so nicely to Kim Jong-un. So the U.S. could do more to enforce our own laws, and we could be pushing China to more fully enforce the required sanctions.
Yes, because, of course, the whole reason for UN sanctions is to inhibit North Korea's ability to build its nuclear and ballistic missile program. Clearly, that's not happening. And instead, the sanctions are being ignored, and North Korea is thumbing its nose at the rest of the world with considerable help from China. So what other alternatives are there to sanctions, especially given China and Russia want to see an easing of those sanctions on North Korea?
Well, we want to have a comprehensive strategy where we're using all the instruments of national power. So it's not a question of diplomacy or sanctions. We want to use both, along with military deterrence, to make sure we're protecting ourselves and our allies. The U.S. is again trying to reach out to North Korea for diplomacy and negotiations, but Pyongyang has rejected not only working level talks but another summit with President Trump. So while we're waiting for them to come back to the table, we need to ensure that we're pressuring them, we're upholding our own laws and the resolution. So we've also been relatively minor in our pressure on Chinese banks and Chinese companies that are violating the resolution. So again, there's more that the U.S. could be doing to influence the Chinese entities that are in defiance of the international community.
Like what?
Well, the majority of all international financial transactions in the world are denominated in dollars, which means they have to go through U.S. Treasury Department regulated banks. The U.S. Congress over a year ago sent a list of 12 Chinese banks, including the 4 largest in the world, that Congress felt was committing money laundering crimes in the U.S. financial system. To date, the White House has taken action against none of those. And in the past, the U.S. sanctioned British and French banks to the tune of $9 billion in fines for money laundering for Iran. We've imposed $0 in any fines on any Chinese bank for money laundering for North Korea.
All right. Bruce Klingner, thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.